The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Naira Bets handicapping session for the Del Mar Meet opening day and beyond. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, and very excited to be talking Del Mar with two people who have some special knowledge about it that I know they're eager to share with you. Our first guest, actually both of our guests you know from a variety of media, mainly work they've done on both network television and in print and online for the Daily Racing Form. Our first guest covers the Southern California circuit plus the Triple Crown. He's a six-time winner of the Red Smith Award. He's Jay Privman. Jay, welcome back to DRF.com TV. How are you doing?
Good, Pete. Looking forward to Del Mar starting. It's a home game for me.
Yeah, we love that. And then our other TV guy rose to fame as part of the cast of the Horse Players TV show. Since then, he's thrived not only in his own contest play, but as the player development handicapper for Daily Racing Form. You know him from DRF TV, the networks, and his eponymous show and podcast, The Matt Bernier Show. He is, of course, Matt Bernier. Matt, how are you?
Good, Pete. Looking forward to chopping up a little bit of Del Mar opening day.
Excellent. Before we talk about the specifics of opening day, I want to spend some time talking about the meet in general. Matt, we'll start with you. Are there any particular handicapping angles that you look for at the Del Mar meet?
Well, I think you've always got to keep in mind Southern California. Speed is always going to be advantageous more often than not. But I caught the very tail end of you and Jay right before we came on discussing something, and it's the thing that I'm most curious to see what we're going to end up getting out of it with the added banking at the racetrack. And now it seems to be more on par with Santa Anita as far as those sort of things are concerned, but I'm sure Jay has much more as far as details are concerned. That's probably the one thing that I'm most fascinated to see. Does anything fundamentally change from the way this track has played over the past year or two?
Well, let's send that one right to you, Jay. First of all, what do you know about the way that the racing surface has changed, and what would be your hypothesis about how that might change things?
So the way it's changed is, as Matt was referencing, there's been added banking to the turns and even in the stretch too. But it'll obviously be most important on the turns because it should help horses who are rallying wide from not being carried as wide or losing as much ground or having that be as disadvantageous as it would be if it was a completely flat surface. So I think that's one thing that is different. Well, I know that's one thing that's different from the surface from a year ago. Also, just from having walked on the track the last 3 mornings since training opened, I can tell you that it seems like there's more dirt in it or clay as opposed to sand. So I don't think I think it's going to be a quicker surface overall than in years past. That's just the hypothesis I have going in. And obviously, as handicappers, what we'll have to do is be smart enough to watch, not overreact to whatever happens in the double on Wednesday and think that that's what's going to play out for the rest of the 7 weeks. But I think you kind of need to go to school on some of the trends and see if there is a change in the track profile. And because of those things that I mentioned, I think there's a chance that could impact the way races are run and certainly the result.
As always, as a horse player, your observation is going to be your best friend. Maybe a little bit reason to make some extra notes about paths, about pace in these early races and see if you can get out ahead of the curve before everybody in the world figures out what's going on with the potentially different main track surface. How about the turf course, Matt? Are there any trends you've noticed in years past that have helped you identify some winners on the Del Mar turf?
Well, the toughest thing, particularly about last summer, was we started off with just the unbelievable rain situation, and it really threw a monkey wrench in so many different things. So I don't know if that's truly how things are going to kind of continue on to play out this year. I would be stunned if we had a situation where we got as much rain as we did at that time. But No, I mean, anything in particular. I just know Santa Anita, again, and that seems to be just the obvious comparison. Santa Anita, boy, when things get really hard, speed can really carry there, going a mile, mile and an eighth, even a mile and a quarter, or even a mile and a half. But it'll be interesting to see, again, in those first few days, like Jay alluded to, don't jump to conclusions right away, but knowing that we're kind of up against it time-wise with these meetings, whether it's Del Mar or Saratoga, you want to try to get ahead of the curve. And I think something like a track profile is maintaining that can go so far and do so much for someone's game. And if you've never done it, I would highly suggest diving into that.
One big difference at Del Mar on the turf as opposed to Santa Anita is the way the turf sprints play out. Jay, do you have any advice in particular for people looking for horses who maybe the 6.5 downhill at Santa Anita didn't agree with them, but maybe we'll have a little bit more of a chance at the 5 at Del Mar?
A couple things. First off, one thing I think you have to recognize as a handicapper what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I'm clueless when it comes to the turf sprints at Del Mar. I always try and buy as many as I can. I find them to be very difficult races to handicap. The things that I've tended to notice are that horses that have run well on the course in the past at that trip are always worth using, and that it's harder for turnbacks. Horses that maybe were good at a mile at Santa Anita seem to really run well down that 6.5 furlong hill at Santa Anita. But the 5 furlong trip at Del Mar is often way too abrupt for them. And so those are some things that I look at. But I find the races still, even with knowing those couple of things, I still end up having to use like 3 or 4 a race in a 9-horse field just to feel comfortable in sequential wagers.
It makes sense. Going to take a little break here to give a word from our sponsor before we talk a little bit more generally about what's going on at the Del Mar meet. Then later in the show, we're going to delve into the opening day card. Want to let everyone know about the $200 bet and get sign up bonus. Bet the action right from home by opening a Naira Bets wagering account. Sign up today and you can earn up to $200 in new member sign-up bonuses. Use the promo code DRF200 to bet 200 and get 200. Also, as a Naira Bets member, you get exclusive access to the Naira Bets Pick 5 offered daily on the late Pick 5 at Saratoga. Naira Bets is available to horse players nationwide, so go to NairaBets.com and enter promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify for the Bet 200, Get 200 sign-up promotion. Naira Bets, racing's best play. My next question for you guys, and I'll throw it to Matt for starters. Are there any human angles in terms of trainers or jockeys even that you look for at the Del Mar meet or that you've had success with in the past that you might want to pass along to our viewers today?
I don't know about the past, but in case you've been living under a rock, anything Baffert touches right now turns to gold. So I would just, even if trainers that can pop up, you get people shipping in from everywhere. Generally, you get some people from Northern California, but I suppose the only other thing I would throw out there, and this goes back to the opening few days of last year's meeting, keep an eye on those first 2 or 3 cards for outfits that maybe you've never heard of, or they are based in Northern California, because they'll ship in and maybe on paper they don't look like they necessarily belong, but they can come and pop at a big number. I remember we had a number of horses, at least 1 or 2 that came from Los Alamitos last year, and not the afternoon, came from the night races and ran well. And then you also had a couple from up at Golden Gate in the fair circuit that came down and ran very well toward the opening. Those would be the only things I would throw out there.
Jay, how about you in terms of people to watch? And feel free to start discussing specific trainers with 2-year-olds. I know you've done a ton of work on the subject, and there's an excellent article on DRF.com right now, several excellent articles previewing the meet by Jay that everybody should be checking out as well. But in terms of the humans you have your eye on in particular, who are they?
Well, the one guy who used to be like the automatic point for Del Mar guy who you could just really go to the bank on for about 3 or 4 straight years was Pete Miller, but he's gotten so big now that he's just a factor year round. But what built his business was all the success that he had every summer at Del Mar. because he would just point for the meat and fire. And obviously now he's going to be a contender for leading trainer at every meet that he runs at, but he still has Del Mar as the meet that he's most focused at. The guy from Northern California who is not regularly on the circuit, who I think always has a chance to be very live down here is Billy Morey, who is a very high percentage trainer, usually ships in a pretty good number of horses for the meet here, but only basically comes in for the meet and then goes back to Northern California. A lot of the Northern California guys who used to just ship in for the meet are now pretty solid down here. Obviously, guys like Hollendorf or Miotti, I mean, they've pretty much brought their best horses down here, if not completely relocated. But Billy Morey still is kind of a hit and run kind of guy, and I think is someone who's not usually on the circuit, who's certainly worth following at Del Mar.
I once had a NYRA trainer tell me that a win at Saratoga is worth 3 at Belmont. Do you see that? Do you think there's any of that, Jay, out there in California? Do trainers save horses they think are live to run at Del Mar? Does it mean more to win there, or is it different? Is Saratoga sort of unique in that regard, and the dynamics in California are just a whole different deal?
No, I think it's very analogous. There are, just like at Saratoga, you get more people at Del Mar, more trainers are here. They want to win here. The other thing is at Del Mar, as compared to just the prior 2 weeks, for instance, at Los Alamitos, the purses are significantly higher. So you'll have people who will sit on horses for 2 or 3 weeks and wait for this meet because they're going to be running for significantly more money than they would have if they had run at Los Alamitos. So there's very much an element of that, and it's a place to get noticed, just like I was saying with Peter Miller. And I'll tell you a guy whose career just absolutely took off on the East Coast 10 years ago that people might not remember when it happened then, but they're certainly familiar with him now, is Chad Brown, who had an on-fire meet at Saratoga about 10 years ago, and he only had about 12 horses in his barn. And by the next year, he had 60 horses in his barn, and I think now he's got like 200. So you want to, it can really help someone's career if they do well at Del Mar, analogous to what can happen if you get hot at Saratoga.
It can be a launching pad. And speaking of launching pads to potential racing stardom, there's those 2-year-olds we were talking about before. Who in particular, Jay, do you have your eye on? Are you really looking forward to? You're really looking forward to see in terms of 2-year-olds at Del Mar?
Well, there's certainly the usual suspects out here. Baffert has a lot of horses. Some have already run, but he's got several to debut. There's a filly. You were talking about this race on Wednesday. The filly he's running Wednesday, just a smidge, can run. I've seen tape of her works. She's very quick out of the gate. She is going to be very live in that spot. He's got a colt that I think is going to run on Saturday, first time named Narrow, who's by Pioneer of the Nile, who might be his best one at this point. He's certainly got others that have like.
Apologies, we're having a couple of technical difficulties here. Hopefully the guys will appear again shortly.
I get it back.
We got it back. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with our webinar software tonight. We'll fix that in the editing room. But sorry, Jay, we lost you when you were in the middle of telling us about the 2-year-olds there. If you want to just give us a little bit of a wrap before we proceed.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where I left off with you. I know where I left off with me, but where had I gotten to just a smidge in the
we were just
race
talking
on
about
Wednesday?
just a smidge, yes.
Okay, so she's very live. I've seen tape of her works. She can run. Baffert's got a colt named Narrow who's going to run on Saturday, who looks like he's got quite a bit of talent. But that Baffert's going to have a lot of good 2-year-olds because he's just got such a deep, well-stocked barn. The two people I call attention to for this meet, who I think are going to do well, who aren't usually known for having 2-year-olds ready to go at this meet. One is Richard Mandela. He's got a lot of fillies that look like they have quite a bit of talent, including Varanasi, who runs in this opening day race. But he's got some others that I've seen on tape who I think can run. There's one I'm really interested in who's going to run in the next couple of weeks. And I'm looking through my notepad now because I want to give you her name. Ladybug, her name is. She's a Medaglia d'Oro filly. And he's got several other fillies. And the 2-year-old story that you were referring to that I wrote that's online at drf.com has several other names there of horses of his that look like they can run. And the other guy who looks like he's poised for a potential resurgence at this meet is Brian Coroner, who's been kind of quiet for a few years, especially with 2-year-olds. But Samantha Siegel bought a number of 2-year-olds in training for him earlier this year, and a couple of them have been training really, really well over at Los Alamitos. And you know that sort of Miller and Baffert and Hollendorf are strong with numbers and all, but the couple guys who I think might jump up this meet, Mandela especially, and Coroner. He's got a great R colt named Paddock Pick and a Pioneer of the Nile filly named Taylor and Burton, both of whom should run 2 to 3 weeks into the meet that look like they've got quite a bit of quality.
Taylor and Burton, I love it. A blast from the past name. One of the stories of this meet is certainly going to be the horse that looks like the fastest horse in the world at the moment, Arrogate. Could potentially run at Del Mar 3 times not at the meet, but between now and the end of the year. Matt Bernier, how excited are you about seeing Arrogate at least once, probably twice, at this Del Mar meet? And do you think there's anybody out there who can warm him up?
Well, I mean, look, if anyone doesn't get excited about the thought of watching a horse like Arrogate run, then you're probably just not in the right game, or you're not really a fan. And that's look, diehard gamblers, I get it. You're in it for the cash, but it's hard not to get excited to see a horse like this go out and run. As far as Saturday is concerned, if he does go, which it sounds like all systems are going, I don't think anyone's going to get to him. And I think if he were going to lose, it would be at a mile and 16th as nothing more than a tune-up. And I still don't think he's going to lose. We've seen some good horses that he's humbled, and they've gone on to do good things this year, particularly a horse like Gunrunner, who came back. And, I mean, a case can be made that he's one of the top 3 or 4 horses in the world, and he got absolutely buried by Arrogate. So it's just a scenario where I think he's in a league, in a class of his own. And, I mean, I know this sounds just insane to even say this, but considering how fast he's run, he's only run a handful of times as a 4-year-old. I mean, is it really that inconceivable that he could take a step forward as he continues to mature? And if he does that, I mean, is he really going to start running a 130? I don't know, but it's fascinating to think about. And I just think he's in a different, just an entirely different league.
It's fun to imagine that, actually. Jay, what are you seeing and hearing about how Arrogate's doing?
So he's had a strong series of works for his return. He really gave him a hard work last weekend, 6 furlongs and 11 and a good gallop out. Like Baffert told me the other day, I went up to Santa Anita to talk to him the other day about that horse and some of his 2-year-olds. And he said, look, I'm in a position with this horse where the only way this horse runs is if he's going to perform like the Arrogate we know he can perform. He says, I'm not going to take him over there going, well, I hope he does okay today. So all I can say is if and when he shows up, whenever you see him on the track, you expect to see the Arrogate that we've come to expect in all the races like the Travers and the Breeders' Cup and the Pegasus and the Dubai World Cup, because there's no reason, as he said, there's no reason for me to get caught with my pants down by running a horse. So I'm not sure if he's absolutely positively going to run lights out.
That was a great piece, and I really enjoyed the insight into a trainer's mind. Obviously, trainers want the fastest and best horses, but if you think having the fastest and best horses makes a trainer's job easier, think again. It really does sound like Baffert puts an inordinate amount of pressure on himself to make sure that people get to see the real Arrogate, and it sounds like that's exactly what we're going to get when he turns up at this Del Mar meeting, and I know we're all really excited about it. Do either of you have a horse, other than the 2-year-olds we talked about already, other than Arrogate, who you're excited to see at this meet. Now, that you can answer the question in any way. It can be a horse you want to see as a fan. It can be a horse you're excited to bet on, who you've been waiting for. Does any horse leap to the tip of either of your tongues?
I mean, for me, it would be Stellar Wind, who I think has a chance to be the best of that division if she's not already right now. She just seems to have improved from last year to this year, and she was plenty good last year. She beat Beholder a couple of times, and she didn't get her best chance in the Breeders' Cup Distaff when she stumbled at the start, and that race ended up being one of the great races for the ages. And she's going to run in the Clement Hirsch in her next start. So I would say her, and Dre Fong looks like he's going to finally make it back to the races in a couple of weeks. And obviously he's the best sprinter in the country when he's on his game. So, and he hasn't run since the Breeders' Cup. So those would be the two horses that come to mind for me that I'm looking forward to seeing down here.
Matt, anybody to add to that list?
Well, I guess, I understand maybe things didn't go her way in the Kentucky Oaks, but Paradise Woods, I'd like to see what we get out of her. And last I had read, I don't know if it was Jay that filed it or Steve Anderson or someone else, but I believe it was Torrey Pines is what the ideal target was. At this point,
That's
you just kind of want, okay, so the Torrey Pines, you just at this point want to find out if she still, was the Kentucky Oaks just a matter of circumstances that got her beat, or was there something more to it? I still think, the Santa Anita Oaks was arguably the best performance from the 3-year-old period this year, maybe with the exception of Mastery. But I'm very anxious to see her get back and hopefully get back to just that brilliance that she showed us in the Oaks.
It was pretty jaw-dropping stuff, and those are just some of the stars who are going to be featured at this Del Mar meet, which, of course, you can bet via Naira Bets. I want to tell everybody about the 1 million point opening day split. Celebrate opening day at Del Mar with Naira Bets by betting $50 or more on the Del Mar card on opening day, Wednesday, July 19th, and split 1 million points. Win or lose, you split 1 million points. Points will be credited to your account within 48 hours of race day. Naira Bets is available to horse players nationwide. Go to nairabets.com, enter the promo code DRF200 to instantly qualify. So many good things going on at Naira Bets. You can see why people are calling it racing's best play. Let's move on, gentlemen, to talk a little bit about this card on opening day. Normally, we don't spend a ton of time in our handicapping sessions talking about non-winners of 2 lifetime claiming 16,000 races. But I do want to at least pause for a second on the opening race of the meet, because it's the traditional thing at Del Mar to run a 2-turn race. So they start in front of the stands, and you can hear the throng of 40,000 cheering. My first question is a general one. Does this race, because people will see it in the condition book and probably have a pretty good guess that it's going to be the first race of Del Mar, does it annually come up strong for a claimer of this race? What do you think, Matt?
I don't particularly think so. I mean, historically, maybe it has. I'm just looking at the one that we've got here for opening day, and I mean, to me, it feels like this could easily be the kickoff leg of a race at Santa Anita on a Thursday. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's, in my opinion anyway, anything above and beyond what we normally get from a non-winners of 2.
I just remember hearing stories about that at Keeneland back in the day. There'd always be whatever it was, a 10,000 claimer to start